What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to use nitrogen, and today we're going to do some real-world testing to see if nitrogen is all it's cracked up to be. So testing nitrogen isn't new, but I'm hoping to show you some real-world tests, one that your service station might be familiar with, one you might already be familiar with. And we are going to be testing this 1985 or 86 Mercedes tire. We're going to do a leak down test, air versus nitrogen. We are going to do a road force balance test, actually checking the stiffness of the sidewall with air versus nitrogen. And we are also going to do a thermal camera imaging test to see if the tires are actually cooler or actually wearing any different. So let's see what we can find out and see if nitrogen is worth anything at all. We're going to call this the old Mercedes tire test. We are going to start this test off with just air. As you can see, this rim has had a rough life. I pulled it out of the back of an 85 SL Mercedes after we had a flood in our area. So I'm pretty sure this is going to leak air. So I'm going to start by jotting down the date, setting the air pressure to 35 psi, and we're going to check it in a week or two, and then measure the drop of air, and then do the exact same test after I change it from air to nitrogen, and I'll also record the purity level of that nitrogen too, so we kind of know where we're standing. So I will set this to 35, write the date, and we'll see what happens in a week or so. Alright everybody, it has been 15 days since I put 35 psi of air in this tire, which it was 88.2 degrees when I did that. Today it is 84.2, so a little bit temperature variance, but not that big of a deal. Let's go ahead and see how much pressure loss we've had over 17 days with just air. Alright, over 17 days we have lost exactly 1 psi of air. So now I will take our nitrogen machine, set the purity to 97%, or maybe it's 98%, don't remember. I will perform the nitrogen procedure. We will wait 17 more days, and we're going to do this again. So let's see if there's any actual real-life difference in just an idle tire with nitrogen versus air. Alright, I've gone ahead and done the nitrogen install in this tire. Before we wait our 17 days, let's go ahead and check the purity level. It's like 98.2. I'm going to go ahead and set this to exactly 35 psi using the exact same tire pressure gauge I did before, and then we'll check it in 17 days. Alright everyone, let's see if 17 days on nitrogen is the magic answer, or is this all just hype? Let's find out. After 17 days, a little bit of air leak, and we still have 34.6. So after 17 days, nitrogen actually held more pressure than air. That's interesting. So there's a little bit of science to that anyway. And if I hadn't let the air leak out a little bit, trying to put the air chuck on, it may have been a little bit higher. But let's see how the other tests do, starting with the road force machine, and then we'll move on to my personal truck for the thermal imaging, because this tire is not going to be able to ever touch the road. So let's see what happens. This is spin balance test number 1 with nitrogen. 15 tons of road force with number 1. Let's see if it's consistent, and then we'll swap it with air and see if nitrogen or air is better for road force. Alright, we have our data from nitro. I've switched it to air, Let's see if there's any difference.
So I have done the road force testing, and as you can see here, the column on the left, which was road force testing at 35 psi with nitrogen in the tires, we have an average of 14.25 pounds of road force over 4 balances. With shop air, we actually have an improvement at 35 psi, road force testing, 13.25 was the average for PSI. So it looks like so far Nitro has 1 point for maintaining better pressure over 17 days in air. Nitro had 0.4 PSI loss, air had 1 PSI loss, but plus 1 point for regular air, as it appears to be a better ride than nitrogen, which is surprising to me because nitrogen claims to provide a better ride. So we have 1 point nitro, 1 point air. For the next test, I'm going to use a thermal camera and put nitrogen in 2 of the tires on my truck and the regular shop air and drive to see if we're noticing a tire temperature difference over time. So let's see, we've got 1 test left to find out if nitrogen is better than air or if it's all a bunch of crap. So let's see what the test says.
All right, final test. For the driver's side of the vehicle, we have the left front and the left rear tire exactly at 33.3 psi. That was the pressure I set it at, with the nitrogen at 98%. On the right side of the truck, we have the same setting at 33.3 initial setting for tire pressure, and we have just regular clean dry shop air. I'll explain which one was which later when I have a chance to write it down and show you, but we're seeing what the tire pressure ECU sees now. Often there's a variance, nothing to worry about. They're all set at the exact same initial pressure, so we're going to look for differences later and temperatures later after we've been driving. And I'm also going to do the thermal camera to see if there's a visual difference, if this nitrogen in this tire is actually going to help your tires last longer. Is the tire going to stay cooler? Is the temperature going to be more even throughout the tread? I've made sure that the truck's alignment is perfectly on spec. The tire pressure is perfectly on spec, so this is as real world as it gets. The tires are in good condition. They're all evenly worn. I'm sure there's people watching this saying that there might be minor differences here or there, and this is, like I said, this is not a laboratory. This is what your mechanic is going to see, what your service shop is going to see. This is going to give you that real world experience with nitrogen. So I'm going to drive it for a while. We'll check back in at these pressures and see what the differences is. Yep, that's English. What the differences are. And we'll also double check it with that thermal camera. So I'm going to drive it for a while and let's see what goes on. First we're going to do the nitrogen side. Let's see. Sorry if this is a little janky here. Looks like about 105 degrees. There are some hot spots on the edge. Not bad. Let's see what the other side looks like. Looks like exactly the same. I'm going to change the setting here to a little bit more primitive setting. See if it makes any difference. Not really. That's interesting. Before, it was about 105 degrees. Now that I've stopped, it seems to have warmed up a little bit. Maybe due to the fact that there's no air rushing over the tires. How interesting. So when you stop, your tires get a little bit warmer. Cool. Inconclusive data. I'm not seeing any giant differences thermally, so I'm not going to believe the fact that nitrogen's better in your tire for wear purposes. Been replacing tires for a lot of years. I've also never had to tell a customer that their tires have rotted from the inside and that they should have used different air. Even saying that out loud sounds ridiculous. But I'm going to look at the data, the interior tire temperatures, to see if there was any difference while driving, after driving, from when we started the video, to see if there was any noticeable changes or even anything worth mentioning. And then we'll do a final tally and see if nitrogen is worth it. So to get to the point, is nitrogen worth it? Well, do you want a gray cap or a black cap? Or you want your tires to have a nice fancy cap with a green label on it that says nitrogen? Basically, it really depends on what you're doing. If you don't want to check your tire pressures often and you just want to trust that they're at a decent pressure, get nitrogen. But if you service it regularly, let me tell you, it's not going to be worth it. Unless you store a fancy car or a trailer and you just don't touch it very often. But the only time I would say it is worth it is if you get that roadside assistance package for a good price and it covers punctured tires, a tow bill, and a tire replacement. Other than that, if the roadside assistance package isn't worth it, don't get it and save your money. Thanks for watching, and I hope I helped.